Fellow Toastmasters and officers. So now I'm going to talk about feedback. You may recall a week ago I talked about evaluations, which is a form of feedback, very specific for speakers. Tonight, this particular presentation is more for officers in a leadership role giving feedback either to members or to other officers. As I read the presentation, though, this material is great for your spouse, your kids, your friends, because it all has to do with delivering a message that's a little hard and maybe a little hard to hear. And how you do it has a lot to do with how well the person takes the message and can actually hear the message. So it's a little wider audience than it had in there. The whole point of feedback has to do with a human psychological event or response, and that is defensiveness. Now, we all know if you go at somebody like this, they do certain things. They either back up, they tighten up, but when you hear something that's negative, all of that stuff's happening inside. A lot of things happen. The main point is, though, if you're defensive, it's very hard to hear feedback for improvement. So the whole point of giving feedback is to reduce defensiveness in somebody. Now, if you can do that, you stand a much better chance of having them hear the message, believe that you're sincere, and take it to heart. So, the other thing to remember is Toastmasters is a volunteer organization. Now, if you're at work and your boss isn't great at delivering feedback, he or she comes down and goes, you know, you just got to cut that out. You're making everybody upset. You're really not very good at this. You ought to go take a course. Go to Toastmasters. But, you know, you got to fix it or you're going to get in trouble and your next review is going to look bad. So, all right, I'm getting paid money. My boss's opinion has a lot to do with how I rank in the company. So I may not take exception too much. But in Toastmasters, especially as an officer, you give feedback incorrectly to somebody, especially a new member, and you may find a vacant seat there next week and for the next few weeks. So it's very important skill. Sorry. I had the same problem last week. I thought I got it fixed, but apparently not. 4 steps to feedback. The first thing is, whenever possible, set expectations and communicate objectives clearly and often and in more than one media. Maybe send out emails to people. Send emails to remind people. And then verbally in a group, bring it up and remind people. Because there's nothing worse than having somebody come and say, I thought you were going to do that. And you go, well, when did you tell me that? Well, 4 weeks ago in the meeting I mentioned it. Well, you know, all my friends mentioned hundreds of things 4 weeks ago. I don't remember any of them. So you have to remember that just a simple statement may not get action from somebody because we're all really busy. So be very clear in your expectations as much as you can. When you observe people, I don't know if it's observing so much because most of what happens in the Toastmasters Club is you see things or you hear things. And then eventually you have to give some kind of feedback on them. But I think the important thing here is make sure that what you observed was true, was the whole story. In other words, dig in a little bit, investigate. Don't just take one person's word for it, maybe ask another opinion. And eventually we'll talk about actually get the feedback from the person you're giving feedback to. So it's very important to investigate. Immediate feedback, it's very important. I tell a story of years ago. I sat down for a yearly review and my manager said, oh, you do this well, you do this well, you do this well. But something like your communication skills, you know, you're ranked down a little bit. And I said, oh, okay, why is that? And she read through the notes and she said, well, 6 months ago, you know, this happened. And I went, okay, what happened? Well, apparently somebody got upset by something you said. And they fed it back to me. And I said, well, I don't even remember it. I said, did you talk to me at the time about it? She said, well, no. I said, I can't consider it's really fair if I didn't hear about it at the time, wasn't able to give you feedback on whether it was valid or whether I understood it. I don't think it should go in my review because it could not even be true. And since we didn't treat it back then, and I don't have the memory now, and you don't either, and I said, would you please take it out of my review? Well, as you can imagine, this isn't something that your boss takes very well usually. But she did, and it's a principle I've had since then, is if you're going to give feedback, do it quick, and do it while everybody remembers what happened. Very important. And recognize positive performance. Always do that. Nothing makes feedback easier than telling somebody how well they're doing something. And we'll talk about another way to do that. We all do that. You learn to evaluate. You learn to say good things about folks as a way of taking the sting off a little bit when you come to the thing where they could improve. So we all know to do that. But feedback's just the same. So giving constructive feedback. So be specific. We talked about that a little bit. Don't be general. Don't say you always make people upset, or you always, people don't like to talk. You have to have specific examples, or people don't know what to do differently. You always see things differently than other people do, and you really can't figure out what to change maybe until you really know how other people see it. Get the person's input. Early on, the first time you sit down and you know you're going to get negative feedback, you start to kind of ball up inside. And so one way to relieve that is to early on in it ask the person you're talking to give you, well, what do you think about that? Do you remember it? Do you remember observing anything about it? And that kind of takes you out of this position like this and kind of brings you forward and makes you think and undoes your brain and kind of opens you up. So ask for their own input early in the feedback session. Give your point of view. Avoid looking like it's a gang, because nobody likes to be ganged up on. Bad enough that somebody who is in a position of authority thinks you did something wrong, but to make it sound like the whole group or the whole department hates you, nobody's going to improve if you give them that impression. So try to make feedback personal from you. And be sincere. Nothing goes as far as saying, I had trouble doing this during my career, and I had somebody tell me how to do it better. And, through trial and error, I learned to do it better. And somebody hearing that is going to go, okay, well, I guess I'm not crazy or stupid. I guess I'm just, like everybody else. It all goes toward making somebody feel more comfortable. As far as the effect on the team, my personal opinion is, don't worry about that. This is, to me, kind of a pressure tactic. Well, if you keep doing this, it's going to disrupt the team and all this. This is another form of ganging up on somebody, right? So, of all these things, this is the one I agree with least. If you're going to say anything about the team, say something like, if you keep doing this, it may keep people from speaking up or feeling like they can express their opinion. Something like that, maybe. But, don't make it sound like the whole team's going to fall apart if you continue to do this. Because number one, it's probably not true. So the I technique, we talked about that. Don't say you as much as you can. Now, this is hard. You're talking to somebody about their behavior, so how do you not say you? Easiest way is to say, here's what I saw. Or here's how somebody else felt. Rather than saying, you went in there and you did this, and then you did this, and you didn't notice that nobody liked it, and all the you start getting defensive again. Much easier to just say, here's what I saw, here's what I heard, kind of like evaluations. So, and end on a positive note. Of course, that's the sandwich technique we all talk about. And recognize improvement. This is important. Sometimes you speak to somebody and they've been doing some behavior for a long time, but it's gotten better over time, but you still feel it's important to talk to them about it. So really important to say, you know, you do this so much better than you did when you first got here. But I still wanted to mention it because it's very important. It helps, you know, helps us work together as a group. It'll make other people feel better. But, you know, you've learned a lot while you've been here about this particular thing. Let them know that. Give them some credit for it. And as far as recognizing positive performance, be specific. If you aren't specific just like in an evaluation, if you aren't specific when you speak to somebody, they won't really know what you're talking about. They won't know if it's sincere. So you have to give examples if you're going to give positive feedback also. Express your appreciation. Again, we're in a volunteer organization. People are here to learn and to feel good about themselves. And you want to do that as much as you can, but learning sometimes is at odds with feeling good about yourself. So it's kind of a balancing act. But always remember why people are here. Thank people for their efforts. Encourage them. Show that you have confidence in them. All that stuff. All of that just makes them feel better, makes them want to improve and to take advice to heart. So that's all I have. I'd say next time you're talking to your spouse or your kids or maybe somebody at Toastmasters, just keep in mind the old golden rule is the easiest way to think about it. What would you feel like if you were on the receiving end? And how can I make it easier to hear constructive or improvement feedback? So, thanks everybody.